Oh, the kitty's leaving. Oh, sorry. You got a glimpse, I guess. It might as well be like 7 at night because it is so dark. Hence the weird setup over here by the window. We cannot afford to be picky with our daylight. We are here extracting, begging for every inch of it awkwardly by the window. Fall is the most readable time of the year for me. It always feels just so cozy and like I'm grabbing for books. It's probably the like school vibes as well. Anyway, all of this is a rambling intro to say that the reason we are gathered here today is to start a vlog, and one I'm quite excited about. So I think I'm gonna introduce you to, it's a weird way to say it, I'm gonna show you what books I'm reading right now. I do want to mention that this whole intro is actually an adjustment from an original plan, which was to make a longer vlog about everything I read in like the second half of October. I started off reading The Silence of the Lambs, and I ended up having so much to say about this that I've separated it out into its own vlog. But while reading this book, I finished 2 other shorter books, and that was weird. And I feel robbed of being able to share those books with you starting the vlog right now. So I'm just gonna tell you a little bit about those books in a second, but I'm gonna start with introducing you to like what I'm reading right now and a little bit of my reading plans for the rest of October. Just about a week left in October, and I have quite a few of this sort of spookier genre of autumnal reads that I am hoping to squeeze in for the rest of this month. What I am reading right now, The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. I'm nearly done with this. It is a collection of fairy tale retellings. I want to immediately interject that fairy tale retelling sounds like a child's genre. This is a very adult version of retelling. Very wordy, very descriptive, very like flowery is maybe not the right word, decadent. It feels very linguistically decadent in its prose. The vibe of like detail and intricacy that you get looking at this cover really accurately captures the vibe of the language inside. That was a very ineloquent sentence, I think. Kind of, it's like super baroque. A lot of the stories also feel quite gothic and sort of mature. They're simultaneously like not about sex and also entirely about sex, like every story. Also definitely like kind of gory. Literally just read about a witch being stoned to death, so it's interesting. I am liking it, but I do have like a couple specific reservations. I'm nearly done with it, so I can update you on that one really soon. And the other book I'm currently reading is English Animals by Laura Kay. I'm more than halfway through it and really, really liking it. It is a story, takes place in England, as you'd suppose, and we have basically a couple that have taken in an immigrant woman, Mirka, and she's basically like helping them out for room and board. And one of the man in the couple, he does taxidermy, so she's sort of like helping around the house and also helping with taxidermy. And then it has become surprisingly gay. It's not actually surprisingly gay if you read the back, because it tells you that, but I didn't read the back because I don't know, I like surprises. And I'm really into that fact. I'm actually really enjoying this more than I thought I would. I picked this one up because I think it was on Jen Campbell's like autumnal list, and I've been wanting to read it for a while, and I wouldn't say it's like feeling super autumnal to me right now, but it is kind of a nice balance to the other things I've been reading, which has been particularly like spooky in vibe, which this is where I will mention the other books that I finished while reading The Silence of the Lambs that I wanted to be able to throw in here. The first one is The Crucible by Arthur Miller. I will admit I had really low expectations going into this. I just thought of it as sort of assigned high school reading, not meaning to underestimate the classics, but I truly picked it up just trying to fill out the endless backlog of the canon that I'm always trying to read. But I ended up enjoying it quite a lot more than I expected. It's about the Salem witch trials, and if you don't know anything about that story, it is, you know, like loosely based on that. You definitely can only piece together things in terms of historical records, but it's loosely about a bunch of girls who were seen dancing in the woods, and in Puritan America this is uncouth, unacceptable, to sort of get themselves out of their situation, they confess to have been like tempted by the devil, and that's why they were dancing. And it spirals out of control of accusing witches, and really the best course of action, only course away from execution when accused of being a witch, is to confess and say that like the devil tempted you and she sent the devil on me. It was men and women. The story, though, is all the more fascinating when contextualized in the fact it was written during the Red Scare, the communist Red Scare, when you had all this fear of being accused of being a communist and this destroying your career, and that it honestly played out with similar effect to the Salem witch trials, that your best course of action is to like confess and repent and to out someone else. And so I think that within that historical context, it was really interesting as sort of a conversation around the social behavior of moral panics. And I found that really fascinating, and I think that's the reason I enjoyed it more than I expected, is because the Salem witch trials didn't really intrigue me, but I am definitely all here for it when we're talking about moral panics. That was really, really interesting to me. So I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. It's also super short, so it was fun to kind of knock out in a single day. I think that's really fun to have that kind of experience of just reading a book in a single day. The next book I read the the same way. It's short, and I just read it in a day. It was so fun to experience this way. And this is Carmilla. This story is Sapphic Victorian vampires. Plus, it's short, so it's not overwritten Victorian, which is my biggest complaint for Victorian literature, is it just gets so damn wordy. Because it's not too long, I feel like I can't tell you a lot of what it's about. It is the book that later inspired Dracula, at least I've heard. I believe that's right. But the very short premise is that you have a main character. Her and her father are gentry. One day, I think when she's a teenager, they come across like a carriage accident where there's a mother and daughter, and the daughter's been injured, but the mother like has to keep going where she's going, and they offer to take care of the younger daughter. That daughter, who her name is Carmilla. So you have this several months worth with these two teenage girls together, and that's where the weird stuff starts happening and where they start bonding. And I really think it would be a stretch to say they were just friends. You know, it's like written in the 1880s, but it definitely feels pretty gay. It's such a fun, short book. It was a really good one. I'm actually really glad to have discovered this. This is also an incredibly like readable, good entry point for classics I cannot believe I was not familiar with before. Really, really good. It is a Saturday and it is raining. It's feeling very cozy. So my plan today is to finish hopefully both of these books. I might not quite finish English Animals, but I have a couple other short books that I am hoping to knock out, and then we have a trip to the library planned very soon. Okay, I actually have quite a lot of reading update to give. I finished 2 books. I tried starting a couple more and DNF'd them, and then I'm into a couple new ones. So let's start with the books that I finished. One of them will be unexpected, but this one is not. It's The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. I was almost done with it when I talked about this before, so I actually don't think I have a whole lot to add, except to say that everything I heard about this book was like really hyped up, pretty universally just adored. It's an absolute classic. And I think that those things are all true. And maybe I went into it a little bit too hyped up, but my experience of reading this book is that the longer it went on, the less I liked it. And I think that is specific to me and not the book, which is that I'm pretty sure that I have aphantasia, so my visual imagination just doesn't really work that way. So when a book is really descriptive about like the atmosphere and setting the setting, like that just doesn't do a lot for me. And this book has a lot of that, but it's done really beautifully, like in really beautiful prose. And I do love beautiful language and beautiful prose. So at the beginning, that wasn't really a problem, but like the longer the book went on, the more that was sort of taxing and sort of exhausting to me as a reading experience. But I think that if you're someone with a more vivid imagination, like a more visual imagination, then that experience wouldn't really apply to you. So, you know, I would say in the end, this was not my favorite book, and I think for reasons that are really specific to me and not so much the book. When we last talked, I was in the middle of English Animals, and I actually still am. This is not the second book that I finished. I am loving this, but I think with Halloween, I just kind of started wanting to reach for something that was a little more of the season in a spooky sense, and so I tried I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. I do think this is naturally outside of my preferred genre, and all I knew going into it was that it's better to not know a lot going into it, so I tried to not know too much, but mostly that it's kind of weird and unexpected. I think the premise that is acceptable to know is that there's sort of a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship and they're heading to meet his parents. Then things go weird from there, and it is sort of quintessential scariness in that there are situations that feel tense, and then the characters do exactly the thing that you feel like would be stupid to do in that situation. But the book is also, the story is like very clever in other ways, that it definitely is sort of unexpected. It definitely kind of goes places that you, at some point you kind of give up and you're like, I have no idea where this is going and how this is gonna play out. I think I would have had a problem with it if it was longer. It's definitely not my favorite, but because it was short and because it was this season, it was fun to try something different outside of my wheelhouse. I would still kind of give it a 3 stars, but I think that has a lot to do with just my liking that type of a book. I started reading We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, and it just wasn't really sticking for me. I don't know what it is. It was sort of the experience I have with Victorian literature, to be honest, where it just sort of like washes over me, and I just find like every couple paragraphs I'm just daydreaming and I'd like disassociate from the book. I don't know if it has to do with the actual book or if it was just like when I was reading it. To be honest, I don't know if I'll come back to try this again, at least this year. Because of the mood that put me in, I thought maybe I should try something totally different. So I tried Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood, I think, because last year I read The Love Hypothesis and I really liked it, and I've had a very interesting experience this time around because I read this in like a fever dream. I think I started it at like 10 p.m. and finished it at like 5 a.m. And I'm going to use that as justification for having loved it, because I don't think my brain I don't think there's anything wrong with having liked it, but I like reading Love on the Brain. I was running into a lot of the problems that I ultimately heard as critiques of this book, and I had such a hard time sort of getting into it or taking it seriously, and it felt like there were just like things about it that were kind of problematic, really immature, and I don't know, it just really wasn't working for me. So I gave up on that one, which is weird because I almost didn't read it for sake of wanting to save it for a time when I knew I wanted to read a book I knew I would love, because I was almost that confident that I would love it, and I didn't. So yeah, so I mean that's kind of where we're at. I think I'm done trying like other spooky books with my deviation to I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and then the very unfulfilling 2 DNFs in a row. I have come full circle to English Animals, where I'm feeling very in the mood for this book again, so I think this is what I'll be finishing up next, and then we'll see where I'm at in reference to Halloween if I'm wanting to try something scary again. I do kind of want to actually find a book that freaks me out a little bit, because I've never read a book that really freaks me out. I've never. And I thought I was a wuss when it came to scary stuff, but maybe I'm not. I don't know. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. I went to the library and I picked up a bunch of books that I had on hold there. They're less of an official TBR and more like options I wanted to have around for November. Though the first one I might try and squeeze into October if I have time, and it might be the one that actually freaks me out because it is horror. Things have gotten worse since we last spoke by Eric LaRocca. Of This New World by Allegra Hyde. A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. Actually, also, I'm not sure what that one's about. Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. Only heard that it's amazing. Don't really know what it's about either. And Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. Classic. I know what that one's about because of the movie. And then Conflict is Not Abuse by Sarah Schulman. I know this is nonfiction. I think it's fairly academic. It's been on my list for a really long time, so this might be a nonfiction that I make myself read for Nonfiction November. So I'm kind of excited about all of those, although I don't know if we'll get to all of them. So we'll see. I finished English Animals and I loved it. I loved it so much. This is a really phenomenal book, and I loved it more than I expected, not because I didn't think it would be great, but because the book is so unassuming and subtle, and yet knows exactly what it wants to be and is executed very precisely. And so at the beginning of the book, it doesn't initially feel like it's extremely ambitious or doing something particularly exceptional, but by the end, it has accomplished that. I know I already talked about what the book was about, and I want to establish it again. Richard and Sophie are a couple, and they live in a very like traditional old English house. They do very sort of old traditional English things, like they run shoots on their land. And then Mirka, who is an immigrant from Slovakia, she comes and is staying with them for room and board. That's the premise of the plot, but what is really genius about this book is happening with the interpersonal connections of this trio. Sophie and Richard are having some tension in their marriage. Sophie and Mirka start to have an affair, but Mirka and Richard are getting along really, really well. They're good friends. They work in the taxidermy together. It creates this sort of tension in this love triangle that on top of that you have some interesting themes and conversations projected onto these social dynamics where each character is sort of playing out a different role or a different perspective on the modernization of the British identity, where you have an immigrant coming into an existing relationship and you have those who are more open to it and those who are sort of feeling threatened by the idea of an erosion to traditional English values. And beyond this trio, you have other peripheral characters that serve more as a threat there. And you have Mirka, who is this queer immigrant woman who is put in sort of dehumanizing conversations where someone is ranting about immigrants coming and stealing jobs or being very morally conservative about homosexuality and gay rights. And the author is using these people and these interpersonal connections to play with this conversation in a way that is sophisticated, that I do think really brings something new. But ultimately what I loved the most is that it's not heavy-handed, and while you can see that she is playing with these ideas, nothing is really clear as to exactly what the author herself is wanting you to take away, perhaps until the very end. But even then, I think it is more an encouraging of a conversation and less a soapbox with its heavy-handed moral message. This book definitely has a lot to do with the modern British identity, and I am an American, and so I definitely felt more intrigued as an observer of this conversation and less someone that really belongs in it. But, you know, that being said, like, a lot of the conversations apply to a lot of nations, including my own, in their own way. I did start yesterday In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I'm only like 50 pages into this. It's a memoir. I'm really liking this and really excited for where it goes. Book does sort of disclose going in, so this isn't a spoiler, that the crux of this novel is dealing with an abusive relationship with her girlfriend. So it was established in the prologue, and I think we'll get into it more, that there is sort of some nuance and need for a conversation that's not really happening in abusive queer relationships. It's something I've never really read about before. It's definitely informative for me. So I'm liking it. I am feeling ambitious, and I'm thinking I might try and read today Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. It's not like super short. It does feel like a little bit sparse enough that maybe I can fly through it pretty quick. So we'll see how that goes, and then I'll probably wrap up this vlog at that point because we will be moving into November, and I have a very different vibe for potential November TBR, so we'll see how that goes. Happy November, everybody. I am really sad for October to be over, but also glad that it's November as well, because November's gonna be really fun. Let's wrap up this video. Yesterday I did end up reading Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, and honestly, I don't have much to say on it. It was very meh to me. I didn't find it very scary. It is body horror, so there were definitely some points where I was like, ew, that's gross. It's definitely like weird. I can see how it would freak some people out, but it just didn't feel like tangible enough to actually get much of like an emotional rise out of me. Again, I think this comes down to my compatibility with the genre more than anything, which I should probably abandon this genre if I'm gonna keep on reading books and have that kind of review. But anyway, things have gotten worse since we last spoke is one of 3 stories in this book, and I only read that first one. It's like 150 pages, so it's the majority of the book, and it is also the title story, and I didn't care for it, so I figure I'm not gonna bother with the others, so we're gonna leave it there. And that's also where we're gonna leave this vlog. We'll end it there. I think this is gonna be the first video that I've posted in like a year, like 9 months. So anyway, this was really fun to do actually. So I would love to say hi to some of you guys in the comments, and I hope you had a really fun October, got up to some fun spooky Halloweeny things, or just autumnal in general. I think that'll do it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in another video.